bonkin', everybody, and welcome to Take Your Time. My name is Tom Marks, joined by Jonathan Dornbush. Jonathan, how are you?
Meow. I'm a cat. I am just pretending to be a cat on this train. How are you, Tom?
I don't know why you saying meow that way just made me so deeply uncomfortable, but this is a show where No, you go ahead and do the intro, then I'll tell you if you'd like to dig into this cat bit a little more, I'm happy to do so.
I can tell you the logic of my brain on about 3 sips of coffee. So I was like, oh, what's a funny thing I can say that isn't nice to steal you? Because that's sort of my ending catchphrase now. And it was, Morgana, when Morgana has to pretend to be a cat in real life and does a terrible meow. And I was thinking like, oh, that would be funny. Also, because yesterday I was watching an interview with Danny Pudi, and he was talking about the episode of Community where he turns into Nicolas Cage and he does Nicolas Cage impersonations. He's like, I'm a sexy cat. And so that was in my head. And that's where all the cat meow came to in my brain. Yeah,
this is a real good start to
it's
to
really
this show. My favorite part about Morgana meowing in real life is that he usually meows when he's like supposed to be quiet.
Yeah.
Like the problem is that he's talking, not that he's like being heard. Anyway,
yes.
If you're new here, this is a ridiculous, stupid, terrible idea for a show where we play Persona 5 Royal in real time along with the calendar dates in the game as they translate to the real world. So we are on, as you might assume, May 31st to June 6th, which was the last calendar week. We are going to be talking about the end of Madarame's Palace, the whole second half and boss fight. We actually have a really busy week this week because we're going to be including that whole section of the palace and the boss fight. We're going to be talking about the week of free time, what we did, how we differed, that sort of stuff. And then also, this is when the deadline comes up, so we're talking about how that palace concludes and kind of, I think it's a day after the deadline of kind of some other stuff that goes on, which is a little bit more plot light, but it is still... there's a good amount to talk about today, so we're going to jump into it. But first, before we do Palace talk, we had a pop quiz last week, which we have our answer to this week, and then we'll also check in with the fandom and see some comments.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, thank you. So last week I asked which of these treasure items that you pick up during a palace, the little gold things that you just sell to EY and he buys, no questions asked, because he's not shady at all, which of these items are not a treasure you pick up to sell in Madarame's Palace? And the options were a plastic frame, an unsigned mug, a dirty brush, and a crappy portrait. Jonathan, did you have a guess?
For some reason, the unsigned mug is what stands out to me, and I don't know if it's because I read it in the game or because it's the one that I think it is, so I'm gonna go with unsigned mug.
Okay. We had. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, but I think it's wrong. But I know that phrase is in my head. And
sure. I get that. That happened to us when we were fighting. Like you fight Persona that you remember from the original game, and you're like, they either deal nuclear or they're weak to nuclear, and I don't remember which.
I'm gonna try and attack. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. We had a YouTube comment. Mitch said, complete guess of the pop quiz, crappy portrait, literally no clue. I'm surprised that this one didn't stand out to more people, or not didn't stand out, but like I always look at those things, so it's like, to me it was like, oh, this will be an easier one, and then it was like, oh no, nobody cares about those at all but me. So the correct answer that was not one you pick up is the dirty brush.
Oh.
Unsigned mug is my favorite one because the implication is that the mugs should be signed, and I don't know why.
That's the thing that confuses me, and I think that's why that phrase stands out to me, because it's just so specific. Like, of all the memorabilia I would want a famous artist to sign, I think a mug would not be in the top 50, and then it's like the sadness of an unsigned mug is like baby shoes for sale, never worn. It's like mug for sale, never signed. Why does that matter though in this situation? Like, I'm just gonna drink out of it and never look at the side. It's fine.
So there was a brush. There was an animal brush, which I like, but then there's also a couple others: the sooty kettle, the bad sculpture, and the cracked vase. I love the idea that all these treasures basically just are like Madarame sucks. Everything in his palace sucks. It's all bad. That's basically the implication there.
I'm gonna, not just for this quiz, but I'm gonna pay more attention to these just because I feel like it is a little bit of like world building that I have not clearly been paying attention to, but is very funny and interesting in its way. So.
Yeah, I enjoy them. And I hope you guys pay attention to them a little more too, because there's way too many. You get like 12 different types of items every palace. Anyway, a couple other people on YouTube also commented to mention last week we were talking about not Kichijoji, that's the place we were going later. Shikiyoji, very similar rhythm, and how it's like this big wall because it's only weak to nuclear. You don't get nuclear early on. A couple people very kindly mentioned that you do get something called the Atom Ring, which gives you fray if you put it on as an accessory. That is super helpful to kind of add fray earlier in this. That is a Royal Edition, well, those rings that give you abilities are Royal Editions, I believe. And B, that's totally true and it's very useful and you should definitely use it. But also because I'm spoiled and I've been using the Deluxe Edition items, I just like haven't switched off of those Deluxe Edition items yet because the accessories that you get are like incredibly good to start. So it takes me a couple palaces before I throw those away.
I've just been using the ones that when I found like the week after you had said, oh yeah, you get all the Deluxe Edition stuff, like I found those items and so I've been using those. But yeah, I immediately, as soon as I saw the comments, went into my inventory. I was like, oh yeah, I have the Atom Ring. Could have been using this. Cool. So I did equip it for the final palace run just to make sure I was like in good condition.
You get the Breeze Ring pretty early on too to give someone Garu, and then I think you also get one for Dia pretty early on. And then there's the Kamoshida will accessory gives you diorama, I believe.
Yes, yeah. I think you're correct there.
Those are cool little things. I like that you can get an ability like that, because otherwise, it's really hard. Like, you can't give cards to people like Ryuji and On. You can't give them to your party members. So it's, I like those additions, definitely.
Yeah, it's a neat way to help, again, add a little bit of strategy to things and to think about, like, especially with something like this where you're like, oh no, this enemy is weak to this thing I don't have access to. But if you have this item, you can, and you just need to, like, think that stuff through. I appreciate that for sure.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Where to start? So we're going to start with the palace, right? We're going to start with the second half of the palace. If you remember, the first half of the palace ends where Yusuke falls into the metaverse with you. He awakens to his persona, Goemon, and you fight back some dudes and then run away. Now, you're just buds with him, and he's like, I'm going to help you take down Madarame. And you're like, great. And so when you decide to go back into the palace again, he's there, and you end up having this little conversation in Shibuya with him about how Morgana explains that one thing that I think is important, which is that Persona users can't have palaces, is one thing that Morgana reveals here, right? That because you're so kind of connected and in touch with your inner self, your inner shadow, your inner persona, whatever you want to call it, it is impossible for it to corrupt, which is why this kind of comes up a lot of like people being like, wow, you're really in touch, like you're really confident and in touch with yourself and know who you are. And it's because this idea of like, you've awakened to your persona, so your inner self and your outer self are like more on line with each other.
Yeah, I don't remember that line in the first game. I assume it's there and I just don't remember it, but I thought that was a very important, like, also a bit of lore that shapes things to a certain extent of like, it helps to a certain extent imply that like no one in your party is going to suddenly like become an instant villain or something, or like you're not going to just accidentally walk into Ryuji's palace when he decides to turn bad, I guess. But yeah, I thought that was a neat little addition and something I wish I had remembered because it feels like an important bit of context. But yeah.
This also, once you get into the palace, you obviously pick Yusuke's code name. The codename pick obviously goes with Fox, but I love this because he's just so cool. Like, he wants his to be Da Vinci, and then you can suggest anything, and he'll just be like, okay. Like, he's just is totally cool with it. Sure, but then also, this is like a weird, hilarious moment of like one of those times where localization just has no chance of expressing what the joke is, right? Because they suggest Inari, and then Inari I believe it doesn't mean fox. It's like related to fox, like a fox spirit, right? Or something like that.
I believe so, yeah.
And then Inari is also the name of a sushi type thing where it's the rice wrapped in tofu, bean curd. And then they suggest that his name be the name of that bean curd instead, but then it's just like a Japanese name, and you're like, why does that relate to anything? And it's because it relates to Inari through fox and sushi, and it's like a wonderfully weird, obscure joke that is like very odd unless you understand what's going on the Japanese language side of things.
Inari in Japanese mythology is the god primarily known as the protector of rice cultivation. The god also furthers prosperity and is worshipped particularly by merchants and tradesmen. Is the patron deity of swordsmiths and is associated with brothels and entertainers. That one feels a little thrown in there, but that happens often in pantheons where it's like, oh yeah, they're the god of like X, Y, and Z, and then like, I don't know, also knives for some reason.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
The god of war and aged Gouda.
Yeah. Kratos' secret that he'll never tell. He loves a fine cheese. But yeah, it is definitely a sort of a thing that I think probably will pop up a couple times in the translation of things, because it is that like the disconnect of this is something that is happening in Japan. Like this game is set in Japan, and
right.
Obviously when you're translating everything into English, some just cultural things are going to be a little lost. But it's a valiant effort to try.
No, yeah, and that's not me complaining or putting down.
Oh, of course,
like it's an impossible task, right? Like there's also the funny weird things of like, English class to them means literally learning English, whereas Japanese class means like what we think of as English class, right?
Yeah.
And like they just say, they just use them normally, like properly translated, because in their world they're speaking Japanese.
Yep.
And like that's one of those things that is unavoidable, and
Absolutely.
I don't really mind at all, but I always chuckle whenever I see moments like that.
Totally. Yeah.
Anyway, getting into the actual palace, is there anything that jumps out to you? I mean, like, the thing that always is funny to me in moments like this with palaces is they're like, we gotta open this unopenable door and then, like, mess with the security, and then it's like, and let's go run around Shibuya for a week, and then we come back and it's like, no one has closed this door, great, good, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, well, once that door is open, Madarame just completely forgot to close that door in real life. So,
right.
It's just been open this whole time, that very important door. It's definitely one of those, like, video game, suspension of disbelief things where, we're in this world of going into the cognitive, differently worlds of giant palaces fighting crazy monsters, often who have very phallic natures, and sometimes a door just stays open. But yeah, I think going back in, it's so much more so about the emotional implications for Fox in this whole palace, and I think that's something that is pretty well done on the whole, of sort of getting to, I think this last stretch of the palace, we already sort of got it very clearly beforehand, but this really, really doubles down on like just the depravity and the nature of Madarame's vileness, his evil nature, because it really doesn't leave wiggle room. Well, once you get to like the big reveals and discussions toward the end of the palace, it definitely doesn't leave wiggle room there, but it's sort of one of those also, I think it just does the journey well enough for Fox as well, of kind of going through everything and being like, oh, I'm really beginning to understand this person who I thought of in this different way. Like we know he's contemplated leaving before we get those hints from forgive me, but the guy's name who we had met in Mementos,
Nakanohara.
Yes, thank you. And we get the sense of like how tough his life has been, but it's sort of him coming to that self-realization. And I think that's a really important thing as we get into these further palaces, as they're disconnected from the personal story of the original gang, like within their school and all that. Like there is being able to give all these reasons for why they should still be involved in all of this and still care is really important to do. And I think this does that well enough, even if some of the like puzzle mechanics that we get into are kind of like, just like trial and error the first time around. It was definitely
Yeah.
easier this time because I've been through these rooms before. But I do remember the first time going through the painting hopping puzzle and the like door to door puzzle, and there were definitely times where I was just like, I don't know, I'll just go this way, and if it doesn't work, I'll go the other way.
Yeah, there were three kind of, as far as I remember it, and maybe I'm misremembering, but there's kind of like three main sort of sections before you get to the treasure room, which is this big section in its own. And you have that sort of like laser wire area where it's like a little bit of a maze through some lasers, and it's pretty simple to navigate. And then you have that really thematically cool section where you're jumping from painting to painting, like you already mentioned, and you're going through his paintings. And every time you go into a new painting, you hear Madarame's voice kind of like more exposing himself, like you said, for the shallow, not even an artist that he is. And like that when I think of kind of what's the right way to put it? The like very transparently simple, like going through the motions RPG button puzzles. That's kind of the type of room that sticks out in my mind as like, okay, you just go down the path and then that's not the right path, and then you go down the other path and then you hit the button and you walk down the other path. It's just like there's not really much thought involved in it.
No, yeah, especially like the first time you go through, and it's like you can either go up or to the right in this painting, and either you got it right or you didn't, and then you just go the other way the next time. It is very much like, it's mechanically not that interesting, but I do think thematically well pulled off. Like, as you're saying, especially that room really solidifies that, like, this dude does not even care about art at all. Like, it is just a means to an end for him.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we were talking about last week too, right? This idea of like, just even if something is not like necessarily like blowing us away mechanics wise with this palace design, like thematically it is super, super good, and it is super, super rich in that sense. And that also shows up, I think, exactly the same in the last sort of main section of this palace, which is that Escher-esque sort of world where everything is twisted and you're walking on all these weird staircases that like teleport you to other sections, and you have to identify there's all these versions of the Sayuri around, and you have to identify the real Sayuri, right, to progress through the right door each time. And like I actually really enjoyed that part of it, because now I know what that thing looks like. But early on, I was like, they do try to trick you a little bit with like whether the braid is in front of the shoulder or behind the shoulder is like actually like a little bit of a detail you got to be looking for there.
Yeah, there's definitely, the first time I played it, like this time I've seen that painting enough to know it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The first time I played it, it's tough, especially if you, like, you know, the painting is narratively important and like emotionally important, but you don't necessarily immediately think, I should really study this painting and look at it.
Right.
Because it like, also as someone who just like, I obviously I love talking about various forms of art. I'm not great at, like, when I see a painting, I kind of just see the painting. Like, it's real. I really need to look at a painting for a long time to be able to take in the details of it. And so this is one in particular that challenges me, because I was like, the first time around, oh my God, I don't know. I know the broad strokes of this thing, but yeah, like the braid, I think one of the ones that tripped me up was like, there's the branch, the tree branch. I just completely forgot about it one time. Was like, oh damn, that was there. Right. I completely missed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that one works better than the puzzle mechanic of the big painting room, as cool as that room is, because as you were saying, like it does tie in directly to your remembrance of this painting that is also important to everything else. And so, like, at the end of the day, if you didn't study it, you'll know it by the end of this section, or at least like I did the first time around. Like, I very much got to know that painting, and now that painting's name, I can never not hear it without like Matt Mercer going like, the Sayuri, like it's just like the surprise of like how important it is. Like, he really sells just how meaningful that painting is to him. And so I can only hear that painting's name in my head said by him. But yeah, I agree with you that I think that room does it a little bit better than the room before it, for sure, or the section before, I guess.
And then finally, the last sort of room section thing is this large spiraling room that goes up to where the treasure is, which is behind a giant laser cage with Madarame just standing in front of it. And you,
what's he got to do? You know,
this is also like this section is very funny, right? Because it's like my favorite part about this section is that they give you a second safe room so close to the first one in this area, because they're probably realize they're like, you don't want to keep walking up that big spiral path. Like, we'll just give you another one at the top of these stairs.
Yeah. I think the first time I played this game, I kind of got lost a little bit in there and didn't find that second safe room at first. So I did walk up, and then I think I was on the like infiltration, go to the boss fight section, realized there was another safe room there. I was like, oh, I could have just warped there. But yeah, this area for me at least, trying to think about it both in the context of playing now and my first playthrough, sort of also helped sell to me the scale of things, because this room for me at least really sold the gravity of like, things are important, because as you were saying, like Madarame is just there, like he's just standing there, and it's kind of, it's a little bit intimidating, because you're like, if I go directly there, I'm going to die. Like there's just no way we're going to be able to get what we want this way. And so it sold to me the idea that like, oh yeah, they really need to be a little more clever about their approach to this stuff.
Yeah. And also it's just hype, right? Like that's the thing, is when they first go into the museum, they're like, of course, if we're phantom thieves, we would steal from a museum. And then you get this like Mission Impossible Lower Morgana down on a rope to steal a painting while you flick the lights off at the same time. And it's just like, it's very silly and fun, and it leans into that sort of art thief fantasy a lot, which I really like.
Yeah. It's what you want them to do in a museum. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Like that's what they should be doing here. They should be doing the Tom Cruise drop down on the wire thing, and it just happens to be Morgana. I'm totally with you. I think like the way it conveys that stuff is like, okay, we're also not just kind of repeating what we did the last time, because in Kamoshida's Palace, it's like you just kind of go up to that room and you're able to get in there. Here, it's like, okay, how do we get around this? We act like thieves. We act like the thieves that we are. And it's, I like the thematic setup of it a lot.
And I guess we should continue on. Is there anything else like with the bulk of the palace you wanted to talk about? It's, I think a lot of it, besides those rooms we talked about, we kind of covered in the last week, of a lot of what happens in the first, or the feeling of the first section of this palace kind of continues on in the second, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything like hugely mechanical that gets introduced here that really struck me or changes anything. I think it's those rooms that I think continue this, as we've been saying, the cadence of maybe a little bit generic puzzle design, but when it fits thematically so well, I'm willing to give it a little more leeway.
Yeah, sure.
And especially with the Sayuri, detecting which one is correct, especially when you're in this kind of like wild MC Escher, as you were saying, like painting area, that I think also hints at like palaces can get weird. Like it doesn't just have to be the manifestation of a typical building,
right?
Heightened a little bit. Like it can get really out there, and I thought this was a cool example of them doing that. I'm trying to look at my notes. There is the introduction of cards in here.
Oh yeah. So that is a mechanical thing. The reason I kind of forget about that too is, and even though I mentioned them earlier on, is honest to God, I basically never use cards unless I'm using them to like do one of the twins like requests. Yeah, I pretty much don't use cards ever.
I was gonna say, like, for the base game, I wrote in my notes, I did not use them once unless like a side quest dictated me to. Like if there was something maybe in Mementos that was like, you should use a card here or something like that. Like other than the maybe tutorialized version of it, I never once touched that mechanic. And like, I'd love to know from people who are listening and watching, like, did you use it? Is it worth diving into maybe this time around? Because it is something that like, it's there, but I just never used it.
To me, it's a combination of the fact that I feel like you go through personas so quickly that like the idea of it's that RPG thing of like, well, what if I need this later?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I'm not going to use this card on this persona because in, 5 hours of gameplay, I'm going to be getting rid of that persona probably. So, like,
Totally.
why would I then maybe I'll use this card later. And then I just never use the cards because you get better cards and then you just have tons of cards. Yep. And, like, it's a combination of this idea of just, like, things constantly shifting, not wanting to waste things, and then also just, like, not necessarily needing them all the time. I don't know. It was just never a mechanic I really overly engaged with, and yeah, I'm curious too if there's anybody else who like has a strong case for why you really should lean into that, because it's like Yusuke's whole thing, right? Like we haven't gotten him as a confidant yet, and this is a little bit jumping ahead, but like eventually his whole thing as a confidant is like making cards and copying cards for you, and I basically just like never asked him to do that my first playthrough.
Yep. Yeah, I like stopped hanging out with him because I was basically when I was deciding what confidants to go down, and I had looked up, enough of a guide to know what powers did what, so I wasn't just wasting my time. I was kind of like, oh, I don't care about the cards. I'm sorry, Yusuke. Like you're great, but I need these other powers over here, so I'm gonna go use these friendships to get powers that they don't know they're giving me. It's fine. That's how friendships work, right? But yeah, it's a mechanic that's there, so I'm with you. I definitely would love to know if people have used it to like great effect, because I'm down to give it a try this time. But yeah,
jumping forward to the next day.
Yeah.
Or not the next day technically, but whenever you send the calling card, because I ended up just sending the calling card on the next day. The week I did it.
Yeah.
The next day, there's this really nice conversation that happens that I just wanted to highlight. When you're deciding on the calling card, you decide that Ryuji is gonna write it again, but with help from Yusuke, and Yusuke is he redesigns your logo to be the logo that you know and love with the hat and the mask. And there's this really interesting moment that I wanted to pull out because I just really like it, where Ryuji says something along the lines of like, man, it's crazy to think about there's a whole world that we don't know about and can't see. Like, I wonder how many other worlds there are that we just can't see and we don't know about. And Morgana says this thing that I really like, where he's like, don't, like, there's no reason to worry about that. Like, someone is racing cars outside my house.
Someone's
I apologize.
worried about it.
Yeah. Like, Morgana's like, don't worry about that, because, like, you don't even know everything about the city you live in.
Yeah.
So, like, why are you worried about, like, things you don't know about, worlds you can't even go to and don't know exist, right? Like, I love that idea that it's like, oh, yeah, if I think about it right now, like, I've lived in this city for a long time, and I'm like, I don't know everything about this city, so, like, why would I think I knew everything about, like, the world at large, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, this is going to get into too much of a therapy session, but, like, the number of times, honestly, even a week, that I have those existential, like, I am so infinitesimally small in this universe sort of thoughts about, like, yeah, I've lived in San Francisco for 5 years. There are just neighborhoods I've never been in at all. And like, even New York, where I lived for much longer. There are just entire parts of that city I never went to, or things that like people were foundational to their lives. And you get down that thought process and you're like, oh, well, just on any given city block, there's all these people whose lives are going on. And I'm not involved in those whatsoever. And not that I should be, but like, what are they thinking? Oh God, no. Oh, and you spiral. And anyway, we should keep moving on before I start to cry. But yeah, it's definitely it hit home for me too. You're not wrong.
Well, I like it because in my eyes, it's a very optimistic sort of thing. It's just kind of like don't worry about it. Like, this
is the dichotomy of us.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
No, I do love that. I do love that. That's I think a great way, and honestly probably the way to look at it. But yeah, my pessimistic brain is just like, you don't matter.
Okay, well, this isn't quite half full, but I'd say it's basically half full.
Mine is definitely, I've drank most of this coffee. It's mostly gone. Yeah.
Anyway, you sent the calling card. Madarame gets very mad. The calling card goes to the actual exhibit, so he has a freak out moment in the exhibit, which is very funny.
I love it, yeah.
And then you do this amazing Mission Impossible heist plan, and then you have to run with it. You get the treasure. It's a painting, right, covered in a sheet, and you have to run down the side of the building with it, which is really funny and cool.
Yeah.
And finally, you get to that courtyard where you opened up the door and Morgana's like, let's look at the treasure. And you open it and it's like this child's drawing, basically. It's a thing that kids draw in Japan pretty much, that you use letters to spell out a face, basically. And they're like, wait, this can't possibly be the treasure. And it's then Madarame shows up and goes, you fools, I switcherooed you, ha ha ha. And the treasure is actually, which he brought with him, which is probably like not the best strategic move if you're doing a thing that someone's trying to steal. But
that's real. That's really like, you know, crime boss in a movie who's like, I've got the upper hand. Let me show off a little bit kind of mentality. But yeah.
And it's the real Sayuri, and we get this big revelation that's also super depressing, that the real Sayuri is actually that whole kind of blue splotch cloud at the bottom is painted on, covering up a child that Sayuri is looking at, and that Madarame actually reveals that Yusuke's mom painted the Sayuri, and it's a self-portrait of her holding Yusuke, and he stole the Sayuri from her and painted over the child so that there'd be this great mystery about what the Sayuri's expression meant, and that's what all the art critics said, ha ha ha, they ate it up. And then also, as everyone's like yelling at him and getting mad, Yusuke's also like, so does that mean you like also threw away my mom the way you threw away other people? And Madarame reveals that Yusuke's mom was having a seizure and he just didn't call an ambulance to save her. He just let her die so that he could steal the art and also the child who might have artistic abilities one day. And at that point, you're like, oh, this guy is the worst human ever. Like, it's not just that he's like greedy. It's like he's like a genuinely awful human and has been long past his like quote unquote art slump.
Yeah, it's not just like a dude who kind of started, you know, maybe having a pupil and using their artwork, and then kind of had this spiral of just doing it with every new pupil and kind of using them and tossing them aside. It's like, no, he is, as Kamoshida, like rotten to the core.
Yeah.
And it is such a horrible, depressing, just disgusting revelation. Like, well done. Like, I think it conveys what it needs to here. But yeah, it hits me so hard because it is just like, you disgusting human being, like poor excuse for a human. And it's also one of those things that I think the painting thing is funny because at least for me, it's like, the whole mysterious look thing I always associate with like, oh, it's supposed to be like the Mona Lisa of, you know, the art world in this time and everything. And I love the idea that the Mona Lisa's just been hanging up there. It's like, oh yeah, if you just erase the background, you can actually see like a reflection of what she's looking at, and it's not really that interesting. But but like I just the levels of his revelation too is I think what's really well done here, because it's like, yeah, he didn't just steal the painting, he didn't just paint over it to hatch the scheme, he didn't just use you know, a pupil of his or an artist's work of his, he let her die. Like, he effectively killed her.
And then raised that kid.
Yep.
Messed up.
It's so
crazy messed up.
And no wonder you want to beat the hell out of him.
Yeah. And then you do, except first he turns into 4 paintings. So this boss fight in the original game was just this 4 paintings part, right?
Yeah.
It was, he would turn into these 4 paintings where there's 2 eyeballs, a nose, and a mouth, and I can't remember what the balance was. I think it's that the nose or the eyeballs are immune to magic and the mouth is immune to physical, I believe, and then the nose is just like middle of the road, and you have to kind of take them down all together because otherwise they'll resurrect different parts of the face, and it's kind of tricky. And I believe the original fight you basically just did that 3 times and then it was done.
That sounds about right from what I remember. Yeah.
And that part of the fight is actually like not super easy, right? Like, because you can't, it's 4 enemies, so it's a lot of attacks coming at you, and you can't use moves. You can't use all attack moves because what will hit one person might heal another, right? And so it's really pretty strategic about it. And then also they'll put this black paint on you that makes you weak to everything, so they're constantly exploiting weaknesses and getting one mores on you. And that part of the fight, I think, is actually like pretty hard, at least from what I was playing.
Yeah, I always remember this one as I think I died a couple times in the original fight. Here I managed pretty well, but yeah, I think it's probably the hardest fight so far, but like in a fun strategy way. Because yeah, you're totally right. It is one of those things where you have to. You're doing the guesswork that you normally do, but you have to be smart about where you're doing the guesswork. You have to think about the risk reward of using attacks that could hit everyone, like not just maw attacks, but even something like if you have Panther in your party, like using her gun, because her gun will hit multiple people and things like that. Yeah, you have to be really careful and think about, maybe you do want to risk healing, like maybe it's your first attack, so you're like, I'm just going to hit everyone because I might as well, they're all at full health anyway, and try out an attack. But as you're whittling down, it's like, do you really want to risk someone that you've hurt? And yeah, if you're not focused on all of them, they'll re-heal each other. Like it's a really cool strategic fight in a way that it keeps you on your toes in a really fun way.
Yeah, and definitely the first time you fight it, like you were saying. And there's this mechanic too where you can use the black pan against them to like make them weak to things, but like I ended up moving on to the next phase before that actually happened. And they were like, you should use the paint, and then it just didn't happen. So there's a little bit of like a safety valve in there for like if you're having too much trouble or it's going on a little long, you can like do that part of it. And then the second phase of this fight, which is all new for Royal, is Madarame, being the forgery faker that he is, summons fakes of himself, clones that have different elements, and they can be fire, ice, electricity, or wind, and then you always have to use the kind of opposite element on them, so fire against ice, ice against fire, so on. And that will weaken them. And this part of the fight, A, I think is a lot easier if you have the right elements in your party, but also B, it's very fun because you just, like, it's just the game of like, okay, how many times can I baton pass and how can I just like chain this forever?
Yeah, this is this second half of the fight. Like, I like that it's in there. It is definitely not nearly as strategically complex, because it literally is. It's just like, what's the color of that enemy and what is the opposite color of my powers? And then I'm going to use that one. But yeah, it is a really fun one where, like, if you are correctly strategic and you have either the party members or the items, because obviously that can be your workaround if you don't have someone in your party. But yeah, if you're able to chain enough things to really just go like back to back to back to back, it is a very satisfying fight to have. And I think a catharsis that you need at this point after you found out how terrible he is I think just
beating up dozens of versions of him.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing for me, because this second half of the fight, like, for full transparency, I did play a little bit of Royal before we agreed to do the show, months ago when it came out. And so I got up to here, and this was sort of the end where I decided, okay, I'm going to take a break for now. And I remember playing this boss fight, and the first part it's really fun and strategic, but it can be really unforgiving if you just get a string of like bad turn after bad turn and you're accidentally healing your enemy like one after another, and you can feel awful. Here it is pretty much like, as long as you have a basic understanding of the elements, you can do pretty well here, and it's really satisfying to do so. And I don't know, for me, that's a really fun element, because it's like, yeah, we're just gonna beat the crap out of all these Madarames.
Yeah, it's definitely easier, but also I do feel like I've heard other people say that in the base game, Madarame was kind of like the first real power check on you, right? Like, it's the first time you're like, oh, have you been leveling? Have you been fighting all those extra shadows, right? And so, like, this might have been a little bit of, like, trying to make it a little bit easier for people in that sense. Anyway, I think this boss fight is pretty fun. Yeah. Both phases are pretty entertaining. Definitely more strategically interesting by a pretty wide margin, in either phase than Kamoshida was, right? Kamoshida is a really fun, weird, cool fight, but it's like very straightforward, and it's just like punch him a bunch, punch the goblet a bunch, okay, now punch him more a bunch, right?
I think if we're gonna keep like a running tally of our rankings of like the Palace boss fights, this one is definitely like tops for me between the two. Yeah.
You beat him up, and then what happens? Oh yeah.
Then the game ends.
In my notes, I literally just have in all caps brands. because I think that one point I was laughing because he said, people don't care about art, they just care about the brands of people. And I was like, brands!
Yep, yeah.
Anyway, they defeat him. They convince Madarame to go back to, to go back and repent. But Madarame, unlike Kamoshida, who's just like, yes, I'll do this, Madarame's a little bit more like, no, and like very sad about it, but has given up at this point. The one kind of big story moment in this is also that he mentions, at one point he says, what about the other one in the black mask? And you're like, wait, what? And so there's some indication that like, oh wait, there might be someone else in the metaverse at this point, right? Like that's the first indication that you found that you are not the only ones that might be here. And they also say Madarame could just be lying, right? But this idea of like, oh, this is like a little bit concerning that he said this is a trend that continues forward. Yusuke tries to ask him about it outside of the metaverse, but obviously he doesn't remember anything inside the metaverse, so that doesn't work out. And this is just something sort of like in the back of their mind after this point.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think that covers it for now. We'll definitely have more to say as it goes further, but yeah, and
no, I'm sure this will never come up.
No, probably not. Yeah, this game doesn't like to really follow up on anything that it leaves hanging. But yeah, it's one of those things, and I guess Royal, you do have this interesting other layer to it of like, at some point also Yoshizawa will end up in the metaverse because you see her in the opening as well, which for me, I don't know the context of when she enters like that, so we're not spoiling anything, but that's just, you see her there in that intro. And so it is one of those things where it's like, again, we're layering stuff in there, and I'm excited to get to where those things end up.
Yeah. So you escape and you're very happy and everything is great, and then you finally exchange contact info with Yusuke, which is my favorite thing because you had not exchanged contact info with him yet. I guess On had, right? Only On had. Yeah. But like, man, that's funny. And this is a trend too that I think they eased this up a little bit in Royal, but one of my favorite running gags when I was playing the game the first time is like, it takes, and spoilers a little bit, but not really, no story spoilers, it takes so long to make Yusuke a confidant. Like, it takes just way longer than you would ever think it would be. And this is, I think, the first part of that, where you're just like, you're way colder with Yusuke in mechanics than it ever seems in the story, where you're like warming up to him and it's still like, okay, we can be friends now. And it's like, wait a minute, we weren't? Like,
yeah, it's like, we've gone through some stuff, my dude. I feel like this is, if we're not friends, I don't know what friends are. But yeah.
Anyway, that's the end of the palace. Let's jump into free time quickly and talk about some of the things we did this week.
Yes.
And then we'll catch up to the deadline, because there are a few days of free time.
Yeah.
Starting with May 31st, where we had a quiz in class about Captain Kidd, which is, of course, Ryuji's persona. Although I guess it wasn't technically about Captain Kidd. It was about a fake pirate that didn't exist, that I'm blanking on his name right now. And then Captain Kidd was, like, the real pirate.
Yes, I'm blanking on that name, too. But, yeah, I always enjoy when it's following up on Arsene and Lupin, of course, being mentioned in class as well. But
right.
As we've said before, I love when these get tied in, the questions.
Yeah. It's really nice. And then we have Deep Sigh, the beginnings of a plot line also today, before you get your free time on May 31st. Ryuji calls you over in the courtyard and says, hey, look at this. I found a flyer for a sexy maid service that we can call and they'll do quote-unquote anything for you. And Ryuji's like, we should call it sometime. And you're like, why? And he's like, cause they'll do anything. And it's like very cute high school boys being ridiculous. And then Mishima comes over and overhears you and he's like, I went in on this. And it's like very weird.
That horn dog Mishima. Yeah.
Right? I love this. At this point, this plot line, for anybody who's played the games, will know where it's going and will know it gets weird. But at this point, it is very, like, super bad, like, high school movie style, like, teenage boys being like, we're gonna call a maid service, with the implication being that it's not just a maid service, but also, like, a brothel of some kind, right?
Yeah,
and them being like, what if we do it? It's like very weird and funny that way.
I think Superbad is like the absolutely right. Like that is my initial reaction when I first saw this plot line. Is like, oh, this feels like a teen, like an R-rated teen comedy where it's like, what? Right. Oh, we found a way to see a sexy lady. What do we do about this? And it's like, teenage boys are just the worst.
And it's presented that way, right? Like that's it's very intentionally how it's framed. This is not like what there's again. Running theme of this show, there's a lot of gross stuff in Persona 5. This is one of those gross things that's meant to be kind of a little gross at this point, right? Like, it's a little bit like, oh, this is a little weird, but, like, it's also very endearing that they're like, Joker is very cool about it the entire time. He's just like, you guys are weird, why are we doing this? And they're like, giggling like children.
They're like, you know why we are. Look, if you put numbers in the calculator, it spells boobs backwards. Like, that's basically the energy of their conversation in this.
It is.
And yeah, it's definitely something that, like, we'll discuss where it goes and the sort of the stuff around that. But yeah, as of right now, I think at least the initial presentation of it is very Superbad-esque, which isn't wrong, and obviously, like, there are cultural things that we just don't. There's not a similar analogy to me, I guess, in America of like a maid service sort of
no
thing.
It doesn't. That's a very, very big cultural difference, right?
Yeah.
Like that, we don't have anything like that in the States where it's like, and that took me a little while, right, to like fully understand kind of like, because the implication about whether it is actually just somebody who will come clean your home and they're just being gross about it, or if it's like actually like prostitution and that's just well known, and like that's a cultural thing that's lost on me. But eventually, after playing through the game 3 times, I think you piece together kind of the understanding that they have that this is like. Yeah, it's like Mishima says he wants to do it for research, right? To see if they will do anything. And I think that's also part of it is like they don't really fully know, but they're like pretty sure it's a prostitute. And they're like,
yeah,
like it's just very weird.
It is definitely a cultural disconnect thing that, I don't know. When I was a teenager and guys were talking about like finding, you would just watch HBO when it got late. That was like, that's the closest equivalent I can think of like what kids would tell each other at school of like how to find illicit materials. So yeah, it's definitely, there's like a bit of cultural context that I think is lost in the translation. Not like the literal translation in the game. I just mean like in terms of, actual understanding of these things. But yeah, it's we'll discuss where this plotline goes for sure in future weeks.
Well, me sooner than you, but we can handle that when we come to it. We do have actual free time this day, though, after deciding what Mishima discusses as Operation Maid Watch, which because they're gonna hire a maid and watch her is the anyway.
These clever boys. Yeah.
What did you do in the afternoon, though?
I hung out with Takemi, because I'm a bit behind Joe on that, so I was starting to level that up. And yeah, I think I just got the Confidant up another level there, and then in the evening I made coffee with Sojiro to get him to like me more. Nice.
So I couldn't level Takemi, because I need Charm to get her up to the next stage. And so I leveled up On, did the thing where you hang out with On in the park, and like she wants you to just like insult her a bunch.
Oh right, yeah.
To like get up her confidence, which is very weird and funny, and you can just be like, this isn't gonna work.
This isn't
doing anything.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, I did Operation Maid Watch. So immediately Mishima called me, and I imagine this is because I had already done the palace at this point, so it was more available to me. But you already leveled Ryuji up to 7, so I'm mad at you about that, because that still hasn't triggered for me. So I get the maids, you get Ryuji, and we'll see how the chips fall later.
I'm happy with where I'm at, but yeah.
So I did Operation Maid Watch, and I'm happy to wait to talk about this because we have such a packed week anyway. So we're gonna hold off on talking about this until Jonathon gets there, just because it's like not for any like content reasons, just we have a lot to talk about already, and that is a whole thing to unpack as we get deeper into that storyline.
Yep.
After that, June 1st. What what'd you do?
That was the day I went to the palace for the pre-calling card day. So I went in there and then just made lockpicks in the evening.
Okay. Yeah. I continued the Operation Maid Watch storyline very slightly, so we'll have to talk about that as well. But I went to Harajuku with An, just hung out with An.
Oh, cool.
Going to Harajuku, got the Idol poster for
Nice.
my room, which is one of my favorite ones, because you get a nice big blue poster on your wall. And then in the evening, I tried to do the Operation Maid Watch continuation, but I didn't have the guts to do so.
Okay.
So instead, I watched a movie the TV show called The Running Dead, which is a Walking Dead zombie parody for guts.
Yeah.
Because you also need guts for EY.
Yep. Guts is a big thing that I always lacked in my first playthrough, so I'm trying to be mindful of that and level it up where I can. And I think I've rented that DVD as well to get it a little higher more quickly.
Yeah, because for people who don't know, I believe the bookstore and the DVD shop update on the first of every month, I think is how it works. So there's some new stuff there on June 1st. June 2nd, Makoto has no chill in the train station.
Yeah.
Continues to just be nosy and weird and be like, so what do you think caused Kamoshida's change of heart? And you can be like, I don't care. And she'd be like, oh, really? You don't care about that? Okay. Makoto.
Classic detective skills. Yeah. It is a fun running gag, or unintentional or intentional, whatever it is. I do enjoy just how blatant she is about her trying to get clues. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what did you do during the day?
So that was my June 2nd was the day I sent the calling card.
Okay.
So I just made more coffee in the evening because I had no one to really hang out with, and I still wasn't high enough to befriend Sojiro another level. So I was just like, more
Sure.
SP will be better than not to have in the future. So
yeah, getting him up to that 4 takes a bit. It takes a bit of work.
Yeah. What about you?
I went to Mementos this day, actually, because
nice.
it was a pollen day,
Okay.
and I did some grinding. I did some stuff with Jose, finally.
Okay.
I don't know if you've gone to Mementos yet.
Not yet. I was thinking
Okay.
of doing that in the next week. Since I had all
Cool.
the Final Palace stuff this week, I kind of didn't want to layer mementos on top of it. But yeah.
Sure. So I did a couple Mementos requests, and I continued the plot line, or not plot line, but continued the mechanics of Jose. So I'll let you... we can talk about that next week as well, potentially, because Mementos has some cool new things with Royal, with letting Jose kind of modify it a little bit and doing some other stuff like that. It's some neat stuff that we can dig into. There's now a monster truck rally happening outside my house, so, cars just keep coming by. And then that evening I finished The Running Dead, which was one of the less funny kind of dialogue things of the movie so far.
It's a good parody name, though. I do enjoy it.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, yes. And then you, I assume, on June 3rd did
Boss
the Palace,
fight.
the
Yeah.
boss fight.
Yeah, boss fight, and then I watched... I forgot to write down what movie it was, but I started a Kindness DVD. I forget the name of it. But I started a Kindness DVD that night, and spoilers, finished it the next night. But yeah.
Cool.
What about you?
On the train that morning, I read a book about Goemon, which I finished.
Nice.
Which got me guts and leveled my guts up to 3.
Nice.
And then on June 3rd, I leveled Maruki, because Maruki again.
Ooh.
Because you gotta spend your time with Maruki.
I haven't yet. I really need to get on that.
Jonathon,
I know.
level Maruki.
I know. I'm being so bad about that.
I don't know if I can, again, no spoilers.
Yeah.
But level Maruki.
So I should ignore... I don't think he was available that day for me. Because, I do want to level
Well,
him
you
up,
were
but-
doing, you were doing Palace stuff,
Yeah,
right?
I think
So-
that's the reason why.
Yeah, but, basically anytime he is available to level, you should probably just take it just to be safe. Because unless there's something really important otherwise going on, or obviously it's not offered, it's just worth it to be safe. You'll have enough time to do it, but also just do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get to December and then have one of us, only one podcast host.
That would be a hell of a twist, wouldn't it?
Anyway, so I leveled up Maruki, which was really fun, and the conversations you have with him continue to be really good and cool and interesting how they tie in. So we can talk about that more once you've leveled Maruki.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. And then that evening, I had the guts now, so I continued the Operation Maid Watch stuff a little bit that we can talk about next week as well.
Cool.
And then June 4th.
Yes, which is I hung out with Takemi that day and got her to rank 5.
Nice.
And then finished the Kindness DVD that evening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
What about you?
I worked at the flower shop. There wasn't really anything going on, so I just did like the first flower shop thing because it's worth just getting that out of the way when you got a free moment, right?
Yep.
And then I ended up leveling Mishima that evening.
Oh, nice.
The funny thing was the night of the 3rd and the 4th, I had Sojiro available for a level up, Mishima available for a level up, and another person available for a level up, and it was like really packed that night, which is funny because you start getting packed days, but you don't start getting packed nights early on generally because you have so many fewer confidants who want to hang out at night. So this was a busy one, but I got Mishima up to I think it's level 4, which gives you like just more increased experience across the board, basically.
Nice.
And you also have a very silly interaction with him where you guys are gonna hang out with some ladies and then get stood up by them because Mishima is a square.
Oh, I think I remember that from the base game.
Tried to hang out with ladies online, and
was he
poor boy.
Was he trying to use the fan site? Was it one
Yes.
of those? Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely remember that.
And that's our last day of free time. Mm-hmm. So then we go on to June 5th, where Madarame is holding a press conference and confesses everything while weeping his terrible eyes out, just like really, really ugly crying.
Yeah.
Not that I judge, sometimes you need an ugly cry.
Yeah.
But like,
I mean, I judge him.
Really
in general,
broken up.
but
Yeah.
yes.
Judge him in general. Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But not for ugly crying. That's a natural thing.
Of course. But yeah, the confession happens that day. It's, I think it also starts to bring the Phantom Thieves a little bit more into the culture, because his confession happens we see it from the big sort of monitors in Shibuya, and we get the sense of a few people are connecting the dots of oh, this is sort of like when Kamoshida had that at that school, had that change of heart sort of thing. And yeah, it's an important step, I think, for the Phantom Thieves that this happens on such a scale.
Yeah, in watching that monitor in Shibuya is Makoto going, Phantom Thieves, huh? And then there's another character who's only labeled as Pleasant Boy, who goes, Phantom Thieves, huh?
Yeah, everyone loves to be described as Pleasant Boy.
But we'll have plenty to talk about with that later.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Then the next kind of plot point is you're all just sitting around in the Shibuya station yelling loudly about all of the things you just did.
Of course, as you do.
And you get stopped by it was an attendance officer, even though it was a Sunday.
Yeah.
Basically them being like, hey, make sure you're, not out too late or whatever. It's very they're being weirdly aggressive, basically, checking in on you. And then also Makoto is snooping and watching you.
It's almost just to say, it's almost like you shouldn't have a hideout in a public walkway.
Yeah, almost. And then you also find out that Yusuke is going to move to the dorms in his school because he has a full scholarship there. So basically he's moving out of Madarame's place, so he's getting to a safer space, which is good.
Yes, very good. Very healthy.
That incredibly loud conversation is followed up by a flash forward with Sai, who sets up your next target, who's basically this is crazy that you say you ended up in a museum now. I don't believe you. And you're like, take it as you will. And then she sets up your next target. So we already get our third target that we're doing, which is a criminal named Kaneshiro. So now the Madarame chapter is closing, and the Kaneshiro chapter is opening up. So we get our next setup before it jumps from a flash forward to Sai to back into the present-ish? Present. We'll call it the present.
Yeah.
With Sai talking to the SIU director saying exactly what you said, Jonathan, which is, this Kaneshiro or this Madarame case looks a lot like Kamoshida, and maybe that's tied to the the psychotic breakdown incidences, and she's like, I'm going to investigate it. And the SIU director is kind of like a little bit pushing back. And then when she leaves the room, he's like, grr, I'm mad at her, basically. And you also see that the dude that was rude to you on the elevator from the buffet that also you might have recognized from other ways is listed as the ruling party leader on TV when he's talking about the incidences and stuff like that on TV. So a little bit of just like whirlwind of like other plot points being set up, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff that like is just kind of it might just pass over you for now, but yeah, it's I like that they check in on everything as we go.
Yeah. And to celebrate, I guess they do, we get a new Royal Edition, which is Ryuji's like, hey, let's go play darts in Kichijoji. And so this opens up a whole new area of the map, which is a place called Kichijoji that was added completely in Royal. It's got a bunch of stuff to do. There's like a temple you can go to. I think that's for like SP stuff. You can sell, this is one of my favorite parts, which I really did want to quickly touch on. There's a place there that you can sell old clothing to.
Yeah.
So since the sooty things are always from like the previous, like the older sooty things are always going to still turn into items that are not as good as what you have in current sooty things and current items. So you can take that sooty armor and just sell it directly to a store there. And not only does that get you a lot of money for sooty things that you otherwise wouldn't want to waste your time laundering, you would also get you bonus points that you can then spend on special items in that store. So suddenly you have a way to recycle sooty stuff in a really productive way, which is cool. Jonathon, this was your first time seeing Kichijoji, right?
Yeah, and it was sort of like a little intimidating, I guess, because it is that thing of I'm just so used to Shibuya and what is in the base Persona 5 game, to not spoil anything, but like the hubs that I am familiar with. And so to have this new hub kind of introduced and feel pretty big, like it definitely I ran into that store and got some stuff. I didn't really go to the temple too much, but kind of like knew that was there.
You can't do anything with it during that day.
Okay, cool. Like I saw that was there. Go to the darts place, obviously, but it's like there are a few other shops and a few other stalls and all these little like back alleyways and things to go in, and it was really exciting. Like it is that thing of getting to Shibuya for the first time and getting to get a sense of where everything is and how much you go back to those places and become familiar with them. I assume, obviously, because it's an edition in Royal, like it won't be as necessary as going to Central Street all the time, but I liked the layout of it and I liked the options that were there enough that I feel like I'm going to probably be stopping in there pretty frequently.
Yeah, and so it's got some other shops and stuff that we'll discover along the way. I think you're right that it's not quite as necessary, but there are cool things like that secondhand clothing store, and there's cool things like the darts and billiards place, Penguin Sniper, that Ryuji brings you. And so you don't actually, darts and billiards are both like actual mini game things that you can play, but in this sort of thing, Ryuji is just like, let's just play darts, and it just automatically does it for you. And what this does is it gets both you and his baton pass level up, which is another Royal thing that is really cool, where if you go and play darts with people, and there's a whole mechanic to this that we can get into another time, but you can level up their baton passes. So the first level of baton pass, it's just when you baton pass someone, their damage goes up. The second level of baton pass, if you do it, their damage goes up more, and then also they heal. And then if you can get to the level 3 baton pass, they healed, their damage is way high, and also they gain SP back when you baton pass to them. So this is a thing that's like incredibly useful to do as you're going forward, because you can just like, it makes baton passing to people so good and so like restorative in that sense.
And it was already a good thing. Like it's already a good mechanic to have. But yeah, I went to, I guess spoilers, I played darts the next evening, and so I got to play it a little bit and was like, oh wow, because I got people up to rank 3 immediately, which seemed surprising, but I was like, I'll take it. And it was like, obviously I haven't gotten into a battle yet, but just seeing the additions it gave me, I was like, oh, this is going to be so good. I'm going to play darts all the time.
Yeah. You can get, there's a little bit of strategy to it, right? Where if you like, you want to make it so that like they can hit the last shot, your teammate will hit the last shot, and like, then you have to like say an encouraging thing to them the right way, and that'll get them up to rank 3 immediately. And it's like, it's really, really, it's a fun little mini game, and it's incredibly valuable. I like that they just gave, like, they did this with Maruki, right? And they've been doing this consistently, where they introduce these new things, and then they, like, actually give you really good reasons and incentives to go do them, rather than just saying, hey, here's a thing that exists now, right? It's not like they're adding superfluous mechanics a lot of the time with this stuff.
Yeah, it feels substantial and beneficial to dive into that stuff, which I think makes it really great if you're a first-time player, because it's just another thing that you're like, oh, I should go do this. And if you're a returning player, it's like, oh, I want to go see this because it will reward me for my curiosity for seeing what else is out there now.
Totally.
Yeah.
Moving on to the evening, we did get a free evening. I went back to Kichijoji very briefly to investigate a Mementos quest, which it gives you right away, probably to incentivize you to go back to Kichijoji during the evening immediately.
Yeah.
Of the old man just, like, picking fights, basically, in Kichijoji.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't go to investigate that, but I got that info. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simple thing, right? It's just, like, talking to some people.
Yeah.
And then that night, I also bought the Charm smoothie that was available. There wasn't a shopping network, but then I did hang out with Yoshida because it was Sunday.
I forgot to go get the smoothie, and I've been kicking myself ever since. I felt really bad about that. But yeah, I think I've realized I forgot to write down what I did in the evening, so I'm going to guess it wasn't that important, but I have a feeling it was probably either going back to Kichijoji or because I think I might have played darts twice.
Okay.
Or it would have either been that or I studied that evening. It's one or the other. So yeah, nothing too important for me on that end.
Well, Yoshida has become my Sunday ritual. But then the following day, the last day of the week, Monday, June 6th, Monday in-game, Sunday for us. Never mind, I won't get into this. You go back to school and summer uniforms are in style, so now you're all wearing short sleeves. I love Ryuji because he's like, oh, I forgot to get my summer uniform, and then he catches up with you later, and his summer uniform is literally just exactly what he wears usually, but without his jacket.
Yep.
And he had to, like, go home to change. It's just very, very Ryuji in a very good way.
Though I do remember, like, it made me think of, like, oh, yeah, that was a thing, because I went to a Catholic school growing up, and we had, summer outfits, basically, that we wore for the beginning of the year and the end of the year when it was too hot, and it's a weird thing you had to think about as a kid for if you went to a school that had a uniform. But yeah.
I did not, so it was surprising to me whenever I saw it in this game. Makoto, there's a scene where Makoto and the principal kind of have a confrontation where the principal's like, why haven't you gotten results yet? And Makoto, like, both doesn't tell him, like, tells him she has suspects, but is looking for, like, actual evidence. She's not just, like, rushing into anything.
Yeah.
And then is also kind of mad at him because she realizes he knew about Kamoshida, and he, like, basically admits it, and seems to be, like, questioning that, like, why she's doing this, and if it's with good intentions, and if she should be doing it a little bit. But, like, he also, like, threatens her more, pretty much. And it's just a very, like, not good thing for a principal to be doing.
People in power suck
that's the theme of this game. Then you have a little conversation in class with An and Ryuji where they're talking about how there's a social studies trip the following week, I believe it is, to a TV station, and they're going to, or you had to pick where you were going to go for the social studies trip, and An chose a TV station, and Ryuji and Joker decide to go with her there as well, so that's coming up, little sneak next week. And then did you dodge the chalk this time? You get chalk thrown at you again.
Yes, yeah.
I did too.
Yeah, it felt so good. It was like, finally. Also, again, people in power suck. Why are you throwing chalk at kids, my dude? That's mean.
Yeah. And it gets you 2 charm.
Yeah.
For dodging the chalk. It's a good deal.
What a weird time. But yeah, I was very happy that I was able to dodge the chalk.
And finally, kind of wrapping up the story stuff, it's raining after school, and Kasumi is there without an umbrella, so you offer... Morgana has snuck an umbrella into your bag, which is just so adorable.
Yeah.
And Morgana... Or you offer to walk Kasumi to the train station with the umbrella, and you do that, and you have a nice little chat about stuff, and then somebody at the train station is like, hey, isn't that special student who gets all the special things, and she also gets a boyfriend to hold her umbrella for her, and then like Kasumi apologizes to you for that because she's adorable. And that's basically that whole conversation is she's like, I'm sorry, people make assumptions about other people.
Yeah, I obviously, as not knowing where her story goes, it feels like at the very least they're setting her up as like very worldly and wise for her age. Like she's come to accept how people act, and it can be juvenile at their age because that can just be how people are. But yeah, she apologizes to you for someone else's behavior, and I'm like, yeah, I get that. I would probably have done the same.
Yeah. And then we are into free time. What did you do with your last day of the week?
I studied for guts at the diner since it was raining too, just to get a little bit extra for it being quiet there. And then that's the night I played darts with the gang.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then I leveled Maruki.
How did I miss Maruki again? How does this keep happening?
So Maruki is now at level like 4 for me.
Wow. Okay.
4 or 5, 3 or 4.
I need to go camp
range.
outside his office. Oh my god.
Yeah. Always check the map.
Yeah.
R1 and then square will tell you exactly which confidants are going to be at a place.
I know the buttons, Tom.
Do you?
No.
No. Okay. So I leveled Maruki.
Nice.
Which is, I want you to get ahead in these confidant conversations too, because they're really interesting and I want to talk about them.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway,
how's your Ryuji level going?
Oh, okay. Anyway, I'm moving on. In the evening, I leveled Sojiro.
Nice.
So now I can make curry, which is great. So I have him at level 4. And then the other thing that unlocks in the evening, I think you probably got this too, is you get a call from the twins.
Yes. Yeah, I think I did. Yeah.
So this is an interesting thing that is on another royal thing that you should go check out. If you get this call from the twins, and what you can do is you can go to the Velvet Room or outside the Velvet Room and talk to one of the twins who's just standing outside of it. Mm-hmm. And you unlock this thing that's outings with the twins. And it's basically like confidant dates with the twins where they ask you to take them to like a place like Big Bang Burger or something like that, and you just have a little cute hangout sesh with them that gets you some special stuff. And it feels kind of almost like they developed this as like an alternative way to confidant level them up, but then just didn't make it do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay.
And there's a bunch of these, and they're all pretty cute and pretty, like, I don't know if they're like overly worth it necessarily, but they're like very fun, and you get to learn about these characters a little more, which is always very fun.
Yeah.
And so that's a thing that unlocks now too.
Cool.
But I did not do that today. I hung out with Sojiro.
Yeah. As you do.
And yeah, that was our week, I think. That was the whole thing. It was a long one. A lot of stuff going on.
It's a packed week. Yeah.
And we're going to have a packed plot week next week as well. But it's going to be another good one. We've got the social studies trip, I believe, is this week. We're getting into Kanashiro's plot line, although we haven't even gotten a glimpse of him yet in terms of actual plot, only with the flash forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where we're at going forward with the week of June 7th, starting next week. Jonathan.
Yes.
I believe it's time for some quizzes, though. Do you have a Persona pseudonym for me?
No, yes, I do. Oh. That would just be great if I'm wondering. I'm like, nah, I'm good this week. Yes, no, of course. This is where I try to see if Tom knows the names and the pseudonyms that are given for the personas versus their real names. This week's one is the Foolish Monk.
The Foolish Monk? Is that Kopa Tengu?
It is.
Oh!
Nice job.
Yeah, baby!
Good job there. Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that one.
Yeah, Kopa Tengu. I wasn't... I had to double check because I was like, I think we've seen this one. You do see them in Madarame's Palace.
Yeah.
They're you got it. Congratulations.
Wow, I'm not gonna lie, that was a hard one. So that was good. Okay.
But of course, Tom, you also have a pop quiz, both for myself and the audience at home as well.
Yes. So this is where I see if you guys have been paying attention to the game itself, and I'll give you the answer next week. So, after you beat Madarame, you have this nice, cute little conversation with Morgana on your bed, where Morgana is feeling bad about himself and, like, wondering about what he could be, if he could be a good person. Certainly he can't be a bad person, right? Do you think he's a cat or not, basically, as the conversation goes. And at one point, Morgana says, "There's no way a dashing, honorable rogue like me could be evil. A man who saves those in trouble in the West while punishing evildoers who may lurk in the East. A man who chastises people that smoke inside the South. What does Morgana say a dashing, honorable rogue like him would do in the North?"
Oh, Morgana. Oh, Morgana's wave word is my favorite. I genuinely don't remember what the answer is, so I'm excited to find out next week.
I'll read one more time. A man who saves those in trouble in the West while punishing evildoers who may lurk in the East. A man who chastises people that smoke inside in the South, while blank in the North. What does Morgana say that a dashing, honorable rogue like him would do in the North?
It's so wild. We used to go to restaurants and it was like, do you want to be in the smoking section or not?
I know, right?
That just made me think about that. It's all the same building. Spoilers. But yeah. I do not remember the answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one, but it's also a line I really liked, so I wanted to pick it out.
No, totally.
If you have an answer, feel free to tweet at us. I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter, or he's at JM Dornbush on Twitter. You can also leave a comment on the Dornology YouTube channel video where this is, or you can, I don't know, leave a review and leave the answer there, and everyone will be very confused by it, but that doesn't matter.
Shout it out your window.
Yeah, just yell it real loud.
Yeah.
Write it on a note, put it in a bottle, throw it into the ocean.
Go to your local subway or train station where it's very noisy and very crowded and people can overhear you, and talk about your deepest secrets while also revealing the answer to this question.
Wow, that went a place I wasn't expecting it.
That's a hideout for you. That's a Persona hideout.
Jonathan, I believe you asked me to throw to you too for reviews stuff as well.
Yes, just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been leaving reviews and ratings and likes and comments and everything wherever the show can be found. Obviously, across the board, if you're enjoying the show, please consider following or subscribing wherever you listen to it. I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone. We've hit over 5,000 total listens to the whole show, which is awesome and amazing. Thank you all for tuning into this, and whether you've tuned in on a random episode or gone back to the beginning or listening through, probably the more normal way to listen to the whole show. But if there's a particular week of Persona that you love, but just saying, there is a through line to everything happening here. But yeah, no, thank you to everyone. And if you leave a review or sort of a comment of things on the Apple Podcast, I think is the easiest place to leave like longer reviews. If you read those, if you leave those, we'll read those in future weeks. So feel free to make me say the silly things that you say about us live on this show.
That's all we have for now, though. We're getting tired. Morgana's telling us go to sleep. We appreciate you guys listening as always, and we will see you next week.
Nice to steal you.